There's a team and a city that ignites passion and creativity on and off the pitch. With its cultural diversity and openness, we are creating the world's leading sports centre for innovation, the Barca Innovation Hub. More than 2,000 athletes, male and female teams, 5 professional sports, and the largest stadium in Europe. Promoting knowledge in the sports world and establishing an ecosystem to collaborate on a global scale with universities, research centres, hospitals, leading brands, startups, and other sport entities. At Barca Innovation Hub, we've already proven the future can be addressed in any shape or form. A new tracking system that redefines the word accuracy. A smart cap with personalized pods for rehydration. Envisioning the future of Espai Barca with mixed reality. Together, we can lead a revolution which contributes to society through sports. Wanna join us? Barca Innovation Hub, reinventing sport.
Me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Okay, it's good.
I can.
I was talking there, but since the mic was not working, so going back again, but basically saying hello to everyone. We're starting another session of the Decoding the Game series of videos. For you who haven't watched them yet, this is a series of videos and live sessions and talks that the Barca Innovation Hub is promoting, in which different experts in lots of fields, from sports technology to sports science and medical and even marketing, are talking about their experience in working in clubs and how do we get this to work within professional football. So today we're very happy because it's the first time we're going to do it on data analytics. And I'm very happy to share this conversation with 3 of the people that I admire a lot, and I think are one of the 3 best analysts in professional clubs right now. Today we're going to cover different topics, from how do you actually, from specific examples of how analytics has impacted the game, through how do you create an analytics department from scratch, talking about what are the profiles you need for doing that, who are the stakeholders within a club, how you actually get that through the club, and basically what have we been doing wrong and right in analytics now, and a little bit on the future of analytics, right? So without more preamble, I would let our 3 guests today to introduce themselves. If you want, guys, we can go first. Vosse, then Adrien, and then David. Yep.
All right. So hi there. I'm Soda Boda. I'm head of science and data analytics at Ajax Amsterdam. I run a department that's responsible for all data collection and analysis on player and team performance. And this is from physical performance, tactical analysis, player recruitment, talent development, those kind of topics. So what kind of questions then should you think of for a department like this? So questions like, is the player fit for the job? And for the job, we mean Champions League level. So what does the Champions League, what kind of fitness does it require? But also questions like, how do goalkeepers, how can they dive faster? Does the training with the throw-in coach have effect on the possession after throw-in? In the game, we analyze more complex game models based on our Ajax play principles. And we outline player pathways for our youth players all the way up into Champions League level. So those kind of things is what my department does. Pathways for our youth players all the way up into Champions League level. So those kind of things is what my department does. Pathways for youth players.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. I had an echo, so I thought maybe you had it as well. So Adrian Tarascon, I'm head of game analysis and methodology in AS Monaco for a very recent time, since February. I spent 6 years in Paris Saint-Germain before on the same field. Today, I'm the only non-data scientist actually in the panel because my background is in strategic management and coaching. But there's many similarities with the department of Vosse and Ajax, because basically my role is to look for marginal gains in all aspects. First on the market. By market, I mean scouting, recruitment, squad planning, wage balance, etc. On the players in terms of individual development of the pro players, individual development of the academy, and in the game, in the opposition, preparing opposition, the continuous development of the own team. And of course, implementing a game model, implementing training drills adapted from data. So I basically became specialized into translating football requests into data and vice versa. And now I'm trying to implement data-related approaches on all these fields.
Hello, so I'm David Sumpter, and I'm originally a professor. Well, I am still a professor in applied mathematics, and I've done lots of research in actually fish movements and bird flock movements and all sorts of things I've applied math. And in 2016, I wrote a book called Soccermatics, which was all about how you could apply maths to football. And that seemed to take off and grow. And I'm now co-founder of a company, 12 Football, where we put that type of mathematical approach into practice. And I currently have a research project together with Hammarby Football Club. Yeah, it's here. And we do actually all sorts of different data analysis, from scout to working directly with players. I'm a great believer that players should actually understand the principles behind analytics and data analysis. And we worked with the coaches. And also another important part of it is we work with the fans. So using statistics to explain to them, maybe when things haven't gone so well, explain to them why not, and maybe also just to make them understand when things have gone well, why they've gone.
That's great. Thank you also just for providing a very general guideline of how this conversation is more or less going to flow. I'm going to ask some questions related to the topics I mentioned earlier, and then we're also going to be showing some slides to support a little bit the conversation, and then everyone is free to jump to add some comments or to discuss on every little topic, right? So basically, David, going with you now, this is probably the most basic question possible, that the audience is quite wide from different profiles. Can you tell us a little bit, actually, how can you define football data analytics? What's that? And when someone says that word, what's that about?
Yeah, I thought a lot about this. So how should I make this? And it's difficult. I am a little bit biased because my ideas are really based around the geometry of the game. So how you can actually understand the play using mathematics. So if you've got the slide there, you can put it up. I'll give my definition. Do you have the slide there? I wrote down my definition, so you better. Yes. Yes, I want to read it out so I get it right. I think these things through before I do them, and then I forget exactly what I thought. But yeah, here's my definition. So football data analytics, data-driven analysis of player movement and action during matches and training. And I wanted to give some examples. So, for example, measuring the quality of chances a team is producing. That's the idea of expected goals. That's a team KPI, key performance index. Another one is understanding how a player's passing adds to team goals. So that's something we might like to do when we're scouting, trying to evaluate a player in a various type of way. How does their action play? Then I'm going to talk a little bit later about looking at tactical positioning and transitions. That's a coach KPI. That's something a coach might be interested in learning about. How can we use data to improve tactics? And as I said about myself, my ambition, and I think this should be the ambition of all data scientists within a club, is that it should be used, permeate through all levels of the club. So from the academy, they can understand through data how the first team plays, for example, through scouting, fit into the style of play. I think all the clubs we're representing today have a very distinctive style of play. They should be used in the first team with the coaches. They should be planning by the technical director and the coaching director. And then I put in bold fans, because I think the fans are often forgotten within the idea of data science. And I have, of course, written a book, and I'm very sort of engaged with fans, and I come from that position myself. So I think fans should be involved. And then finally, I think the other two are going to talk a little bit more about this, is that it definitely impacts other areas. There is already data in fitness data and health data. So my definition really brought out what I think is new about football analytics, but definitely we need to think about how data from health and fitness come into the picture too. So that's my definition. You can argue with it if you want, but that's the one I came up with.
It's great. You also have,
sorry, I had some pictures, didn't I? I had some pictures. Sorry. Do you want to
some nice slides on goals and passes, right? Well, I have.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so yes, just to make this a little bit more concrete, I always use this as the starting point, and this is the probability of scoring from different positions. And so this isn't where goals come from. This is actually, if you're inside the 7% ring that's written there, if you take a shot from there, you will have a 7% chance of scoring. Inside the 15% ring, you have a 15% chance of scoring. 30% ring, you have a 30%. This is with shots with the foot. And that's a very basic concept. And that's actually the basis of what is called expected goals. But it's also a geometrical concept. It's about how much of the goal you can see. And it's a concept that you can explain to a player, you can talk to about the coach, you can think about how you're generating those things. So it's a very concrete thing that you can use. And I think it's probably the first and most important example of how analytics has changed. Then if I move on to the next slide, please. This is a lot of the things that Javier and I have been working on and talking about together. We try and break things down, going back further along the pitch into different ways of seeing football. So this is also a way that a player can talk about. So the left, we have pass probability. This is the green areas show places where you can possibly make a pass to, based on a computer model, a physics model of the ball. And the red areas show places you can't. That's the left figure. The middle figure is something we call pass impact. This is what's the value of making a certain pass. And if the ball is at the blue position in that figure, the value of making a pass to those different areas is increasing with the heat. So a pass all the way back to the line is pretty much not going to increase your chance of scoring, but a pass towards the front of the goal or across the goal is going to increase your chance of scoring. And then finally, and this is work that's there's been lots of research on this, but Javier has been a part of developing this, is the pitch control idea. So how much of the control of the parts of the pitch do you control? Green is the area controlled by Hammarby, which is in this example. Red is the areas controlled by opposition. So these are basically geometrical principles of football which come from mathematics, but also come from coaching and training. And I think that's a lot of what analytics is about, is tying those two things together, tying together analysis and football and the analysis side of things.
That's great. I mean, I think everyone is always tempted to say, yeah, this is nice, but players already know that, or coaches already know that. And probably what I find is interesting, but also hard to explain about analytics is what's new about this. I mean, well, are we actually just doing things differently instead of using the brain of a coach? We're using data, or are we actually providing some value? So this is the actual question I would like to ask you guys, all of you. But if we can start with Adrien, basically, what's new about analytics? Why is this something different?
Well, the technology now is not, I would say, that new. It's getting more evolved. But if you can put the slide on, Ravi, I'll I'll try to illustrate a bit my thoughts. So basically, there's a circle missing, but the idea is that analytics will englobe everything that is attached to the game, to the player, and to the market. And if we take the example of the market, I believe we are in an unprecedented period to create value for our respective clubs, because with data scouting, we're having more and more access, at least to even data, and now we have all the technologies to basically get a pretty good tracking assumptions on many leagues. So we have a unique opportunity to analyze players from throughout the world. We have some historicity also to compare, to analyze the transfer. If tomorrow a player leaves David's club from Hammarby, what happens when he goes to Danish league or if he goes to Ligue 1? And on the contrary, you have a few clubs that are working, I would say, in data scouting, but compared to the amount of information you can get, it's clearly a low-hanging fruit. There are much more very good players, cheap good players on the market than clubs to buy them. And this is just, for me, something that is still magical. It will not last for long, but this is the case today. The supply is superior to the demand. So already on the market, you can build a lot. When it comes to the game, well, I will build up from what David said, because I agree with him. The key point and the key learning is you have this what I call personally danger zone map inside of the box, and you know basically what finishing is made of. And if you don't take this into consideration now into your game model, into your game perspectives, well, you're clearly missing something. And this is what we're learning, and this is what we're building on, especially for new game models. And on the player, it's going to be the same, because when you have a game model in a club, or when you try to build a game model that is going to be data related, then you're going to go to, okay, I want this from my game model. So basically, I need this position, this winger to perform this kind of situations, as we call it, positional competences. And these positional competences, then you're going to be evaluate them also by data. So you're going to be able to analyze, to develop, and to prepare the players for the football of tomorrow. Because something we often forget, and something data shows also, is that when you receive a player in AS Monaco Academy or in Ajax Academy at 14, 13 years old, 15, you're preparing him for the football of in 8 years or in 9 years, sometimes 10 years. You're not preparing him for the football of today. So it's very important to see where the football is going, and how can you measure this, and how can you bring new things. And in a future slide, I will add on this and basically our conclusions and our vision. But for me, of course, in the sporting related matters, data is everything. But I'm not going to say something else. I'm paid for this, so.
Yes, I was wondering still in that question, Vosse, I think you have been involved in more than 5 sports, probably, right?
Yeah.
So for
right.
sure, you have been seeing how data can help in all those different sports. Can you add something upon that idea or that question of what is analytics providing that is new?
New. Maybe you can put my slide up because
Yeah.
I think it sums up my idea about just what I call business intelligence. If you go on Google and you look up business intelligence, this is basically what shows up in some of the first findings that you get, which is business intelligence helps organizations to take substantiate operational and strategic decisions. And the main purpose is to use the data collected within the organization and from your data partners as knowledge to drive the business performance. So therefore, it should be collected, converted, sorted, so and so on. And what you want is effectivity and efficiency and upscaling and faster decisions. Well, football is our business. So for every other company, I think in this stage in time, it's not really weird to spend some of your budget on making things more business intelligence based on data. And since football is our business, this is exactly what departments like ours are doing at the moment. So if you go to the next slide, you see that our objective is that we provide coaches and staff with objective information coming from the data. It needs to lead to decision making, so it needs to help them to make better decisions or faster decisions. And it should be either on the individual player level or for the team level. So this basically is what our department is doing. And to be honest, there's not much new about it, but we just make it very new within the world of football, where I think that if we look worldwide at companies, they're already doing this to support their core business. So what does it look like when you go into a football club? So if you go to the next slide, I've put down some examples.
Yeah.
Do you have the examples there? Next one.
This one, yeah.
Okay.
Lost it
Yeah.
for a sec.
So-
Sorry. Yes.
Doesn't matter. One is like analyze the game, so that can be tactical or physical. Your opponent is gonna influence whether you have bigger chances of winning or losing, so you might as well study your opponent. You have certain tactics or strategies that you want to examine throughout the club, so you can use data to do that. You want to monitor if players are fit for the job, and fit for the job for our teams means Champions League level. There's a lot of money involved in scouting and selection, and this is really gonna define how well you play. I mean, the better your players, the most likely you're going to win. And of course, we put a lot of time and effort into our training sessions, so we might as well try to measure their effectivity. So, for example, we hired a throw-in coach. We trained a couple of sessions just on throwing in. And then you want to measure within the game, is there actually a difference in possession after throwing in from before he was hired, and we trained this for a long time, and after. So you want to measure your effectivity there. And then also we rely highly on our youth academy as Ajax. So for us, the player pathway from youth into the first team into Champions League level is a very important process to monitor. And this is where data can help to sort of let them and the trainers know where they are at this stage. And since a couple of years, we have a women's team, and we're really interested in measuring how the women's football develops over time. So just to sum this up, I think what data adds is it puts things in perspective. So if we take the first example about your chances scoring a goal for within the 16-meter area or without, you see, for example, that within the Dutch league, you still have 7% from outside the box to score a goal. If you take it to Champions League level, you only have 2% of chance, which means that the experience of our players is that they have a fair chance, 7%, within their own league. But they should know that if they go into Champions League, that chance is limited due to better goalkeepers, better defense. So it puts their behavior and their experience into perspective on the level that we're aiming to in relation to what they already know.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting for me, the idea of percentages or how to present that, because we can know from the data that 15% chance of scoring a goal is a high chance of scoring a goal, but I don't think that anyone will hear 15% and feel that's a high chance. So it's interesting What?
I was going to say, our players actually talk about those percentages now to each other. So we have one player, Imad Khalili, who stands on the training ground telling the others, that was a 3% chance. And I think one of the, you're right, that one of the problems is for the high percentage chances, or they think that they're 100% chances that they miss, and they're actually 30% chance. But that talking about the smaller percentage chances and taking an extra step toward or an extra pass, I think they're the things that players actually can talk to each other about and think in percentages. Not all of them, but lots of them.
Yeah. So before going with the next question, I would like to present very briefly Virginia Armas. That is, you can find her as Sketch Your Life in Twitter. sketch the first E with a 3. Okay, now I have the name there. So she's an amazing sketch artist or visual sketch artist that has been doing this for a long while now. And she's basically drawing and trying to capture the more important concepts we're trying to talk about and discussing during this time. So at the end of the show, you can we're gonna publish this drawing, so you can have like a short way of really getting a grasp to the summary of what we have talked about today. So. I mean, it's interesting that since analytics is so big as technology or as software, which can touch many things. Can we go to the specifics and mention a little bit some specific examples or you have lived or you have been part of in which an insight that was derived from data really helped directly within the game, even in coaching, even for players, even translating, from training to the game. I think I have some slides from you guys. I have the first one from David, so you can even start, David, to talk about some of examples we commented earlier.
Yeah, this one I'm particularly proud of because this idea I discussed with the trainer Stefan Billborn quite early on when I started working with Hammarby, and it's completely based on the pitch control idea. So I mentioned pitch control earlier, that the green areas here, they're controlled by Hammarby, we play in green, and the red and the blue areas are controlled by the opposition. And one thing we want to do is we often play against teams who aren't, I don't know how you say this, they're not as good as us. And we are up in the final third. In Barcelona, be familiar with this as well, and Ajax, well, you all are, of course. But what we want to do is when we lose the ball, we want to get it back as quickly as possible. And so the idea was this, that if we formed a cross that's shown on the right-hand side, then that actually controls a lot of the area and it controls counterattacks. And so forming that cross actually controls all of the pitch where anyone can do a counterattack. They've only got one attacking player in this situation. And we control lots of things, and you can see this with data. And it's a very simple concept, again, to explain to the players. And so the right-hand side is a positive example of this. And the left-hand side is an example where the players haven't got into the right position. So our left back has drifted out a long way out. And that actually was because the left back is normally our left winger. We didn't have a left back for that match, so our left winger is playing. And he basically didn't know what to do. And talk to him and say, if you're playing left back, you want to come back into this half space and control there. And so his position is coming, that's the arrow from the 1 there. Then that allows the central midfielder to come in. So that's 2. And then the other central midfielder, we play 4-2-3-1, can then come up and participate in the attack. And those are simple ideas which come pretty much from analytics. And well, they do come from the pitch control idea and can be put into practice in play.
That's great. I mean, probably the thing with football is that you always have the both sides, right? Someone can say that player number 11 there, that I guess is your left back winger, should be staying there to provide like a higher width of the team there.
That's at an earlier stage. So I mean, of course, that's it's not me that decides the tactics, it's Stefan.
Definitely.
I mean, at the earlier point of the attack, so when the ball is in the sort of middle third, then you want to have the width. But then when you come up into the opponent's box, then you actually want to narrow down your defense against a counterattack. So your defense in attack. And so exactly, you've got to be very careful and very specific about this, because the width is when you're in possession at one point, and then the narrowing down is when you're in possession at the other. Sort of yo-yo idea that you move in and out, depending on where the ball is up and down the pitch. So there's a little bit more to it than the left back should always stand in the middle. It's really about where the ball is as well.
Can I ask you a question about this?
Yeah, absolutely.
because I think it's very interesting, and I was wondering, do you have this automated as well? Because of course this can be drawn on like a video picture, like one time every time you go through those clips. But I was wondering, is there a way to sort of multiple select all these moments that this goes wrong or it goes well?
We are working on that. We don't have a working example of that. So just now we hand pick out the examples and show them to them. But that's actually that's our longer goal. So the other data scientist working at Hammarby, Fran, is working on automatically identifying those situations and finding. Just now we
then you can add more value.
What we did actually.
Sorry.
Yeah. What I wanted to say was that I tried to get out of Stefan's brain a game model. So I pestered him a lot. He sees me as sort of pestering him actually, but he's very generous with his time. And I kind of said, how do we play in different situations? And then the ultimate idea is then we automate picking out how Stefan wants us to play in situations, and when we deviate from that. We're not there yet, but that's the thing we're moving towards probably during this season.
And that way you can actually measure improvement. So you can say, before this went wrong 40% of the time, now we've been training on this and it only goes wrong 15% of the time.
Yeah, and that's exactly coming back to your thing you mentioned with the throwing coach and so on, that you can actually say, now we're in these better positions. And we looked and we, again, it's not quantified, but we did get better in that during the season. We started off not in the right positions, and then we were in the right positions. What's hard to measure, of course, is if it actually, we can measure if you get in the right positions. What we can't actually measure is if it has any effect, in the sense that we win more matches because of it. That's one of the massive problems in football. There's so much randomness. We can measure if we're following the coach's ideas, and we finished at a position we wanted to finish in the league. We were very happy with the overall performance, but I can't really tell you that this cross is the solution to all of your defensive things. The coach wants it, and we could see if it worked or not.
Well, it's football, right? So I mean, you're not only training to score goals. So in the same time, in terms of analysis, the objective changes. But I think connecting Vosse's question and your comment, it's really complex. The first thing is to really identify those situations automatically or quickly, which is something that is where data can become very valuable. And the second thing is actually validating you're getting more signal than noise, right? Because if you input too much noise, then the final percentage might be referring to a different thing. And I think coaches and game analysts are very quick to spot when you're missing the point, and you're basically trying to add value on that. Vosse, you mentioned you have like a very nice example on that, and I have a slide from yours there. Do you want to mention about this a little bit?
Sure. I just tried to come up with an example that's really easy to follow for everyone who doesn't have all the background on the passing maps and all those kind of more in-depth sort of analysis. So this was a question where, if we talk about corners, and we, with a certain point in a season, tend to have most corners of the whole competition, which was 137 at that point, we tend to think that's a big opportunity for us. Corners are dangerous for our opponents. But it turned out that if we looked at the numbers, and this is something we sort of felt sort of underneath our skin already a little bit, but putting it out in numbers made it a lot more serious. We saw that we scored only 2% of our corners, which is, I could say, below average for a league. Was a big difference with how we performed on the corners the year before, because we did a lot better then. So our efficiency was a lot better on the corners. But most important, we saw that after transition, after our own corners, the next ball possession moment often ended up in our own 16-meter area. So that means that 16% of our corners was more of a threat for us than it was actually a chance. And then this comes back to the question that I asked before. Then we want to make the step to, okay, and this is something serious we want to prevent. Of course, our video analyst looks into how did this happen and what principle wasn't applied good enough for the defense. But also we sort of want to automate and select all those moments that this is happening. So whenever a game ends, we sort of want to be able to say, these were chances out of the corners, these were our threats out of the corners. And since we're usually one of the dominant teams and we don't have many areas in, don't have many moments in our own 16-meter area, this was probably the best chance that our opponent had at that time. So it sort of outlines the seriousness of this problem, and it makes it able to select those moments that this goes wrong very easily after each following match, so that we can work on it and evaluate the changes that we're going to make to try and solve this.
I love this because it's a very good example of, from my perspective, of doing things right. Because you're not talking about only the corners; you're talking about the balance of scoring and getting a goal scored against. Right? Is the corner and then what happens afterwards, and that's interesting because many teams or some teams prefer not to actually take the corner as a mid or long ball into the box, but just playing short and doing things. And I think you can actually add value this way, saying, okay, what's happening? Are we scoring goals that might be highly due to chance because it's it have very low percentage of scoring from corners, but what's happening next, like that? Adrian, you have something you wanted to add on this side, right?
Well, I'll give two examples. The first one related to this is basically on this slide are, I would say, a position analysis framework, and the idea is that analytics are everywhere. So it's not that easy for a given game to say that this piece of information was more important than the other one. But in Monaco, I have still a little experience, very few games with the COVID crisis. But in PSG, we had many big games where data actually had a good impact. And on the next slide, if you can pass to the next one, I'll illustrate a bit. For instance, in this Champions League group match against Real Madrid, we tend to use some basic elements that are going to help the coaching staff condition its strategy, and notably what we call the macro plan. The idea of the macro plan is basically to give something different to the opponent than what he wants. And if you go on this slide, you'll see two kind of numbers. First of all, the numbers that we use, I would say, for research, and the ones that are used because sometimes they're more easy to communicate to the players. In this case, Real Madrid is a team that crosses a lot. So we needed a structure that would help us prevent this crossing. So this was one of the key points related from data. Another key point was their dangerousness in counterattacks. And on this too, we had some elements. So just to say that from all these elements, you're going to build a plan. And in this case, you're going to orient the scenario of the game. And one of the clear rules for the players of PSG in this game, and one of the clear metrics that then we follow live, was the number of ball losses in our own half. First of all, we didn't want to lose the ball in our own half. And second, there was a specific training before the game on where to lose the ball in the opposite half. Because to go together and to connect with the example of Vosse, sometimes when you're not sure you're going to score, there's also in the risk versus reward approach some areas where you prefer to lose the ball and where you recover. And we had clear evidence in the time in PSG that in the games where we tend to lose, I would say, more balls in certain areas, while our defensive transition was better. So this was then directly applied. And the overall idea is that from this specific opposition data, when you add on the continuous work of data from your past experience, well, it helps the coaching staff put the right examples to help the team. And I'll give a second example, which relates more to the one of David, is that in the first year of Thomas Tuchel at mid-season, he wanted to do some changes, and we had benchmarked basically the efficiency to access the danger zone compared with our main European competitors in PSG. We use some metrics like XG per touch in this given area, the touches in the given area per danger zone shot. So basically you try to say, okay, from this area from which I want to access the box, how efficient are we? And from this analysis, we came with a concept that we named preferential crossing areas, and we offered solutions to optimize space creation in the area. And basically what was exciting is that in this case, data research led to new training drills to optimize space creation. And what is even more valorizing is that first point, in the second part of the season, we optimized our efficiency in these so-called preferential crossing areas of 8% compared to first part of the season. And that a few months later, it was also implemented to the academy. So if you go see PSG teams in certain zones, you have the same runs and the same goals that are scored from the other 17 to the pro team, and the same drills, exactly the same. And it's really what I like in this approach, and it was the possibility in PSG, like from the data concept to create football drills, really to use data as a tool to enlarge the football perspective and to develop your game.
So going or following a little bit this topic, I mean, it's interesting that you show information that has to do with stats. You show information that definitely needs to compute a lot of data and to handle and structure that, but you're also translating that into coaching terms, right? So probably something that everyone wonders, and it's common conversation, but not an easy answer, is if you want to create a data analytics department from scratch, how would you do that? And I want to start with you, Adrien, because you just moved from PSG to Monaco, and you have the experience of seeing probably, I mean, you started there, I think 6 years ago, right?
Yes.
So probably in that moment, we have football analytics in stage 0 or -1. So you lived all that transition and now have the opportunity of creating a department from scratch. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, what are the main profiles? How do you build that? How do you make that work?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to be very original, but of course you need some data science profile, and of course one or two PhD simply to develop your tracking models. I mean, you need models to use your tracking data, which is, I would say, not easy, but much more accessible after all the work you've done, Ravi, you've done, David. I mean, now it's again, it's not easy, but it's much more accessible for any club that would hire a data scientist, even with no scientific background, to start on this and to get into models to use the tracking data. Of course, you're going to need some data science also in terms of monitoring the training loads, and even if you can, you go into predictive modeling. For me, it's also important to have at least one expert in visualization, either via Tableau or Power BI in the team. But have we seen visualization is key? Something Vosse didn't mention today, but that I love on our department, is that they have experts of movements. And for me, having a PhD on human kinetics would be key also, because it's, for me, one of the areas where the marginal gains are not even started in most clubs. Basically, we have the tools now to analyze what is the right movement, and we're not teaching this to our young players or even to our pro players. So for me, I don't conceive a department without a human kinetics profile. And more generally, I'll finish with some data analyst profiles that basically are both data analysts, like I always had, for instance, in PSG, plus video analysis. Because for me, you need some profiles with the ability to translate between football and data. And also, you don't need a data scientist to do the data scouting event-based. So for your scouting team, having data analysts purely is enough effective. And I've put on the slide a short roadmap just to mention again, if there are some stakeholders watching today, that just with managing some basic event data, without even talking about tracking, using your event data to do scouting on players and on the opponents, in 3 months, you can make tremendous marginal gains to your team on your performance on the pitch and by bringing better players. And of course, in step 2, you can start using tracking. So I mentioned some spatial metrics. For instance, it will be the ratios between one area to another. You can measure, of course, the tempo, which is quite important in some game models. Then in the third step, you can go again further to the space control. And for me, the final step is to think ahead, and for the teams that can still improve their academies is to join, I would say, the hardware and the analytics, and to prepare your academies. It's the case in Monaco, who is building a new academy, but basically to make sure that you're building a facility that will enable data collection, to build a transversal approach, and to have the same data collection for your young teams than for the pros, to again gain knowledge on the path from the youth to the pros, and gain historicity on the data, and knowledge about, okay, this player 5 years ago performed like this, we believe this one is a good potential, etc., etc.
Wow. I'm thinking, I mean, in that line, it's interesting that you mentioned different profiles that, and the first one is not, a data analyst, a data scientist, and so on. And I think that talks a lot about the reality that you live within a club. Some phrase we typically comment in some other live sessions and in many places is that clubs are not tech companies, right? In terms that you just cannot drive it as a tech company. So I want to ask this question to Vosse, that I know I also have a lot of experience on trying to deal with the big organization with different kinds of roles. Who do you think are the main stakeholders for analytics-based insights? And I'm going to pick your brain also a little bit onto how do we connect inside and outside, right? Because before we talk about collaborating with universities, so people from outside, and a lot about collaborating with different departments within the club. So if you can talk a bit about both things, it will be incredible.
Sure. Can you put up my slide so I can sort of show where our department came from? So I think most more mature sports science and data analytics departments at the moment, they all sort of started off with questions which were more on the sort of physical and performance level. So how many kilometers did they run? Are they fit for the game? All those kind of questions. And I think now more and more game analysts who were first the video analysts also have data science backgrounds. And I think that the sort of where the sports science and data analytics department sits within Ajax at the moment is more like some sort of a knowledge center that's open for multiple other departments. So as you can see, we still work very integrated with our performance staff and our video analyst. But of course, most of the questions are coming from the head coach and the training staff. And we now have an area of our department that's completely specialized in scouting. But also the board asks more and more questions because they are value for the strategy that they want to follow. So if they, for example, want to say something about how many youth teams do I need to educate one or two really good players over a season, and how much does it cost? We would like to know, when did they come in? How did they develop? How likely are they to do really well on a high level? So those kind of questions basically at this stage come from all different parts of the club. And I think, like business intelligence and using data for decision making is more and more integrated within the club and throughout the club. So that also gives us a challenge in how do you manage this well. And I think that's where the next two slides are important. So if you go to the next, Javier, yeah. Then you see still number one most important is that you have a good multidisciplinary consultation. So that means that our head coach or our assistant trainers, they are able to get their information from us. We're able, and their door is open for us to do some suggestions, and we can evaluate, for example, with the performance staff on improvements they want to make. So this connection needs to be there. If it's not there, and I do see this in sort of clubs that think we do need the data science department, they start it up, but they don't really interlink it with the other departments, then you get a very clever data scientist who comes up with in his head or in his room brilliant ideas, but if you don't know what's going on in the locker room and you don't know what the trainers are discussing, probably your solution is not really useful to them, or the solution might be useful, but the way you present it makes it not useful yet, because you don't really know how to present it and what kind of workflow that they have. So I don't know if I added my third slide, but what I think is very important then,
No, I don't have it.
sorry,
So.
it's another one, but it's basically the question: how do we facilitate data analysis throughout the whole decision-making process? And this means that you need strong visualization, which is embedded in the workflow of the coaches, players, staff, and board. And I think that's something that all departments really need to work on not just how do I come up with a clever model or a clever idea, but how do I actually get an improvement in the decision making and the behavior. So I think that's a very important one, and you always have to think about, and that's why I think it's good that you mentioned who are my stakeholders, who are the people within the club I'm dealing with, to make sure that they can use the information in the way they want to work, rather than saying, hey, I got an interesting sheet, everyone needs to look at this, because that's not the way how you integrate this in the decision making.
I love that.
Can I say something?
Yeah, please, David.
Yeah, sure.
No, I just what strikes me as interesting, because I think that Vosse and Adrien are actually, they're the sort of exceptions rather than the rule. And I think because I'm sort of outside this world, of course, I work for Hammarby, but also my main role is I'm also in the public sphere and working as a professor at a university. I know just so much bullshit within clubs about data science, and these two are doing a very good job, but there is a lot of problems to do with, for example, the data scientists who can't manage to communicate because they're from a different culture. That's one of the problems, but there is a bigger problem to do with the sort of bloke who they used to play football with when they were younger, went off to KPMG for a few years, and then comes in doing data science within a club. And I'm just sort of out there, but that is also a sort of problem. So because they don't get anywhere, because they don't get the basic ideas of data. So it's very important when we have this message, and I think that they've given brilliant examples of how you do it. But there is also that kind of message that there's lots of clubs who aren't doing it properly.
Yeah, I think that comes down to just not be afraid to ask questions. And I think that's where it's really easy for me, having different sports backgrounds, because they understand that I need to ask a lot of questions about football just to make sure that I understand them well. I think at the start, it also helped that I was a woman. I wasn't threatening. I wasn't off for the coach's position. I was just trying to help and trying to sort of help them with their questions and try to understand it really well. And I think that, you need to be able to have that communication and ask the question. And if you don't understand, keep asking until you nail it down to what exactly they're after. Because sometimes they ask one thing, but they're actually after a different thing. And you need to be able to get that clear before you start all your analysis work.
I think that more or less common topic in conferences and different places talking about this is, people talking about creating a data culture within a club and all of this. I think you have explained that perfectly. And it's interesting because the way that you put it, I see like a dual challenge, right? On one hand, you need to create a department that needs to function, that needs to get resources, that needs to get information, needs to get working into what they do. But at the same time, you are into a journey of trying to integrate different departments to come together. So I think that a huge opportunity with very, very low cost, if you compare with the gains that a club might have if they do this, is that you're not only gaining a part of, with data I can get some more insights or marginal gains, as Adrien commented, but I can also involve people, because this is something new that comes here that might be interesting, that allows us to get in the same room, people from different places. So I gave a talk some time ago saying that we, as data analysts, we shouldn't say the game analyst and the data analyst and the coach and the players. We should try to be like a moving circle, like a circle or a triangle, like Busquets and Xavi and Iniesta moving around, right? I mean, we should change roles. So because that, if we do it in that way, that will promote that we ask questions, that we get involved in that. Something we try to change a lot from the way that people like me that come from a tech background do oftenly is that we provide a solution with numbers and say like, yeah, this is my work. No, your work goes beyond that. It's really trying to get to these people and really trying to communicate something, because this is the new thing and you're probably the new kid in the block, right? So you need to also put that into work. So going, I talk too much. Going into that line, I'm interested about something that I think people would like to hear is, if from your side, when you got into data analytics, if the understanding of the game from your side has changed, has evolved, and I want to connect that actually with the topic of, do you think that you can actually provide something new to coaches, that their understanding of the game can also change, but not only coaches, but also players, right? I mean, is the only players or the other people in the football world can really gain something from the insights we can get from the data? I mean, what's your experience on it? I think I have even, I have a slide from David, so probably David wants to add something on top of this, right?
Yeah, I think this is more answering the question about, this is an understanding of a player. So this is Adrian Bojanic, who turned out to be one of my favorite players. And the first time I saw him at training, he sort of has a bit of an attitude, it seems. It appears as if he has a bit of an attitude. And he was famous for not really contributing so much to defense, or that's what people thought about him. But when the scouts and the director of football signed him, they actually thought that maybe he could contribute to defense more. And we could run the stats on him. This is just a nice clip of him. What he does best is delivering these lovely balls. But if you go to the next one, we have this, have a player radar. I hated player radars before I started working in clubs, but the coaches loved everything presented to them, or the scouts loved things presented in player radars. So what we do is we actually weight the player radars with the value of the actions that they contribute to the team. So it's not just the number of actions, it also involves how much they increase the value with their actions. And what you could actually see about Adrien is that he defensively contributed a lot. He was often very well positioned to do interceptions and ball recoveries. And so in this player radar, the green things are things he's particularly good at. And it turned out as a central midfielder, he was top 90% for recovering the ball. And so a little bit because of how he looks and how he moves when he's not on the pitch, and when he hasn't got the ball, people had this sort of impression of him. The examples I often take up, other ones are Paul Pogba, Raheem Sterling, who get a lot of this, that they're a lot better. Well, they get a lot of sort of complaints about how they look, and Adrien fell into this category too. And you could actually see when you look at the stats that he was a really good player. And even myself looking at him initially, I was a bit skeptical. But once you look at the stats, you can really get into it and see that he is an excellent player. Those things, I have lots more examples, but yeah, Adrian has one.
No. I mean, going in that line, I think Adrian is also going to connect this a little bit. If you want to go on, Adrien.
Yeah, just to finish and to illustrate what data also changed sometimes in scouting. Typically the player David mentioned, I know him a bit because we also scouted Sweden. I would describe him now as a ball progression midfielder, which wouldn't have been a term I would have used 3 years ago, which is, so there's a new vocabulary that is also created to describe profiles in terms of data, which is also important. For me, the vision, since we have more and more data, the vision really changed. And for me, it's a new game. That's what I put on this slide. And the whole vision of my work could sum up to this slide. On the one hand, you need players to think faster. because the game is going faster. You have more high intensity runs, you have more sprints. And in the last 5 years, it was something like plus 25% high intensity runs. So you have less space. So again, there's a key idea that the player must think faster. And who says think faster means instinctive, which is very interesting, because at the moment where you're going to ask your players to be instinctive, you have more information than ever with the data. And this is on the other side of the slide, it's the better knowledge. So for me, the key is really creating a game model and a methodology where we can use the insights and the information from the data, but to make the player perform then instinctively. That's why it's not only about data, and it's very related to the coaching process then, because if you just pass the data information and if it's too complex, there's no chance in modern football you're going to have a player that can perform this information instinctively. So it was really about building new training drills, especially individual training drills, according to some data information, with the idea of making some optimal situations, some optimal reactions that are not going to be true 100% of the time, because football is chaotic. But basically there's a rule that the more you get close to the box, the more there's some high percentage of truth in the choice of the action. And so this is the idea.
Sorry, I just changed slides.
No, it was basically.
I didn't want to interrupt the thing. I like the thing about the game model. I even have a question in that line. But I think Vosse has an interesting thing about evolution of youth players. I'm gonna let him talk about that a little bit, and then I'm gonna get into the game model part, because I think is two-side question. Okay, go on, Vosse, please.
Yeah, I think that Adrien gave like a really nice cross pass to me to this slide, because the speed of play is a variable that we came up with, which is a sort of combination of number of passes per possession, per minute of possession, and the speed at which the players are moving over the field. And what you can see here is that if you look at the speed of play and you look at all the clubs that were in the pool phase of the Champions League, you see that the ones that made it through are the ones with the blue arrows on top of it, which sort of shows you that the speed of play is really telling you something about how dominant a club can be, but also tells you something about how fast the game is going. And I think this is what Adrien was trying to say. If we look at this year to year, we see that this goes faster and faster and faster. So the decision making needs to be faster. They need to replace themselves faster. And also, if I look at our own league, I see a big difference with how fast we're doing this here, and the rest of our league is doing that, and the Champions League level. So apparently, how fast the game is going is really something that makes a difference. And what I did here to sort of trigger the players is I just took a clip out of one of our matches with an average speed of play for one of our matches. Then I took the same clip, but I only played it faster, the same amount of percentage that the speed of play was increasing during an average Champions League game. And immediately they recognized that the decision making and everything they needed to see on the field was already different. And then I did this again for the game that we played in the semi-final to Tottenham, which is again faster. And then I did the same clip with the intensity of small-sided games in a training session. And they saw that most of the small-sided games in a training session had a speed of play which was about 15 to 25% lower than the Champions League level. So apparently, the quickness of decision making, how quick they needed to perform certain skills, was not really in line with the goal that they were training for. So I think these kind of things, like how can you sort of benchmark the level that you're working towards, is really important, and sort of also gave me good insight in what actually is the difference between playing Champions League and playing in your national league, and how are you going to compare for Champions League if you're playing only your national division, which is at a lower pace, basically. And this was something, because I just converted that video, that really clicked with the players, because this was something that they could see, and the ones who had experienced it felt like, hey, this is really what's going on. It's just, you have little time, you're under a lot more pressure because of partly because of that, and you need to prepare for it, but it's really hard to do this in a training drill.
Wow, that's great. I mean, you actually mentioned something that I think is a main challenge for clubs in general, but for science in football especially, that is the translation from training to matches and vice versa. And it's a huge question. It's like a main central topic in sports science, and it should also be from tactical side. But the truth is, no one really knows how much are we translating what we train to what we are playing. Everyone is trying to improve in that. So I think you just provided a very good example on that, right? Just if you just take a look at speed of play, am I training in small side games where I'm going to encounter in the match tomorrow or within 2 days, right? So I would like to connect that comment and continue with you, Vosse, because you come from a club that has a very, very clear and strong game model, right? It's a club that knows how they want to play from lots of years now. And I'm wondering if you think that's an advantage or a disadvantage in terms of analytics. And the question goes in the line of having a strong game model makes the path easier because you know what you want to train, you know what you want to take a look at, or actually makes the possibility smaller because you can only take a look at 3, 4, 5 things because the other things are not interesting for that coaching staff or so on.
I think if you have a modern coach, which luckily we do, they're always interested in the development of the game. So although you have a strong game model, they'll still study where football is going, and they are open to the development, because if they don't develop, they get sort of beaten themselves. So I think that having a strong game model basically helps us a lot, because the worst question that you can get, I think, as an analyst is, please study the game for me and tell me what went right and what went wrong. Where to start? Like, especially in football, maybe if I do ice skating, I can sort of nail it down into technique and tactics sort of easier. But for football, there's just so many things you can analyze. So having a clear game model, and we sort of divide it up into our play principles, really helps you with researching the question that leads to the decision making that they're willing to do. Also, as I said, to make it for you easier to visualize it as part of their workflow, because they will already comment on the play principles, so you can add to that in with your analysis, rather than just come up with some random thought about the game and sort of have to present this to the coach. So I think it really makes her work a lot easier if you have a coach who really knows what he's looking for and the sort of play principles throughout the club. Because then also, if you have a youth academy, then at least you know what principles will be the same year after year, instead of changing every 2 or 3 years because the head coach changes.
I think I would like to go over this question also with Adrien and David, because I know David probably is going to have a challenging answer for that kind of topic. And Adrien, the first time I met you, you told me about how you spend many time actually designing a game model. And I think, and I was really, really impressed about that, and say, wow, this is like a huge different step. So I guess your opinion on the game model is positive, but if you can add some thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, I had a context slightly different to Vosse's, because of course in PSG you don't have, I would say, a club game model. We had some coaching guidelines in terms of game model, but there was clearly, not only in the academy, something to build. And before going to the slide, I would stress that, again, in light of what I've said, that the game has been evolving so much, I really don't conceive a game model without the data evidence base. And for me, if you think about a game model in the future, it needs two things. First, to rely as much as possible on data, to be built, and second, and most importantly, to be measurable. If today you have the chance to conceive a game model, and it's what we had to do in PSG, it was really thought to be in an integrated process where collectively and individually, as many things as possible could be measurable. So I'll go to the slide, which is, without the animation, sorry, a bit complex, but basically to feed the game model, of course, you're going to have some data research and some data evidence, which is still, to be honest, to base, I would say, your judgment and to have a rock solid game model based on data, you're going to have very few information because we lack of data depth concretely, especially in zones that are, I would say, known shooting areas. So the easiest way to build a game model is, again, to start offensively and defensively with what I call danger zone, what David presented as the shooting probability map. And from this area to ask yourself, how am I basically going to access this area from the crossing areas, from the frontal areas? Are they better routes than others to access these areas? And with already all this, you can start to have pieces of your game model that are going to be evidence-based. And of course, each coach is going to put his own, I would say, his own salt, and you're going to adapt some pieces if necessary. And there are some points in the game model we created that could not be data tested yet. And the objective is, when we have more depth in data, to test them. But however, even though everything is not tested yet, the measurable part is, I would say, inflexible. So when you have this game model, you're going to train it two ways. On the collective trainings, and this is more on the coaching side, but the collective drills related to the game model are going to be more to train the action. And you are going to have individual drills where you're less focused on the action because there's less veracity, but we want to train basically the brain, and we want to train the reference. It relates to what I was mentioning and what Vosse was mentioning before, the speed of the game. And we really need to train now the reference and the decision making to help the players adapt to contexts where they're going to need an instinctive answer and a very fast answer. Then, of course, you have the games. And out of the games, you're going to have both video analysis and data analysis. And we have two, I would say, main group of KPIs. On the collective side, everything that is related to our key areas, our preferential actions in terms of metrics, which are going to be some concepts. I only mentioned one, I will not tell the others, but like preferential crossing areas and our efficiency in these areas. And then the game model, you also use it at a player level. So for each player, you're going to have a list of positional competences. There's kind of 25 or 30. Of course, the objective is not to make a fullback learn everything, but it's kind of a checkup list, or if your player was a car, you want to check up everything in what he's performing or not. And for all these metrics, you're going to have some information with the ball, without the ball. And when we mention without the ball, it's also the offensive runs, not only without the ball defensive.
Well, that's great. I think there's probably a balance on that. Sorry, but I think, David, you were about to pop into the conversation, right? Can you?
I was going to say, we don't have a game model as advanced as that. Hammarby is a very special club in the idea that it's a sort of working class club, and for a long time we were in the lower division, but had the biggest attendance by some margin in Sweden. But there was a decision a few years ago that we wanted to play attractive football and interest football, and that was a very important thing. And so Ola Larsson, who's the technical director, had this he wanted to create some sort of measure of were we playing more attractive football. And at one point we had a KPI, how many passes we made into the final third, but that didn't really capture our football. So in the end, we actually ended up shaping our key performance index around how Stefan Billborn wanted to play football. And he wanted to play football with very rapid passes in the middle third, then go very quickly into attack from there. And so we actually had to make our KPI from there. And we end up in a sort of situation where we're presenting to the board The board just wanted to see a line like this. And so in the end, we ended up in a situation where we just found what it was about Billborn's football that made a line like this. And then we presented that to the board, and everyone was happy and thought this was brilliant. So sometimes it's just that type of solution to things, to see what's developing within the club.
Well, and in going through that idea about presenting and wanting to be, wanting to see straight lines.
The problem is
just make it look like.
The problem is that we now have this straight line, but it's very difficult to see how we can make more passes in the middle third, or if it will be any beneficial to make more passes in the middle third the coming season. One of the problems with the straight line, that they can't go up forever. Sorry, Shafi.
No, it was awesome. No, it was just saying that in terms of communication, probably the ones who have the few time and want things to be really specific are players. And you have been doing, David, an interesting thing is not only talking with players but showing them pitch control models or like visual plots of moving pitch control surfaces, which is not the most common thing. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've got the slide there, I think I've got an example there. So one of the ideas is that we do show them these pitch control things, and again, I want to emphasize that I'm coming from the university environment, so this is partly a research project to see if this will. But they understand these pictures very quickly and can pick up what they mean, and it's interesting to see how they interact with them. So some of them just, one thing, for example, is the idea of it being the right answer. So remember, these are computer simulations, so they're not always the right answer, but often the players treat them as a right answer. So we'll show them a situation, we'll ask them how they should have moved in those situations. And some of the players will say, can I see the answer now? By what they mean is they want to see the pitch control. So they really interact with these in different types of ways. I've got one example of it as a video on the next slide there. And this was an example. This is a very clear example. So you didn't really need pitch control to do this, but this is Alex Kaczynicic. He makes a pass there, which isn't successful. And everyone knew that he should have made another pass. There's a forward coming running here. So if you look at the pitch control, so yeah, we can look at this, look at the clip one more time. He should actually pass to the forward who's coming running to his right instead of passing into the middle. But if you go on to the next slide after this one, you'll see that we could identify the pass to the green arrow as being a 14% chance of this is combining success of pass with the impact of the pass with a 5% chance that he actually took. And so we could actually, everyone agreed on this, and it's a nice example, but you could actually quantify to some degree where that was. And so this is what they talk about when they talk about the right answer. They see the video, I should have done this, and they see the right answer. There's one more example. If you go on to the next one, this is from the women's team. And I think this comes back to a lot of what's been saying. We are working through the academy team, the B team. We have a B team, and we also work with the women's team. And we've been working a lot with defense. This was an example which Fran Peralta found.
It's like super.
Not much video there.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think the action isn't there. Okay. So, but it was a goal for the opposition, so we don't want to see it actually. But again, we talked about the I have of the goal, but we talked about in reverse for defending, and we're defending in this case, and you can see that the two strikers for them have very good green opportunities to receive the ball, and you could see through the build-up all of the opportunities that our team had to come back and fill our box and make sure that they shouldn't have these chances, but instead they drifted over and over and over. And they see this first in the video, then they see it in the top-down view, and they can actually see the spaces that they're leaving open. And this is an extremely effective way of communicating. What I love about working with the women's team is, even though we've been doing the meetings over Zoom with them, they're so much more communicative than the men's team. They really love talking about football in a way that the men's team, you have to sort of push them and push them and push them, and they're all sort of like got their heads down and like sitting like that. But the women were much more engaged and interested to talk about. Very, very long conversation with them when we did do it over Zoom.
Ah, that's brilliant. I only have one more question.
Can I comment on this?
Yeah, please,
sure.
Vosse. Come on.
Well, what I really like was your example of that they wanted to see the answer. It just shows how competitive they are all over. Like it's all through their being.
Yeah.
And this can really help, I think, with the communication of players, because what I try to do is sort of ask them a question before I give them the answer. But also sometimes that doesn't really work. So for example, what I do every winter break, I come up with a sort of a summary of all the stats on the first half of the season, and then related to our play principles. So what goes well, where can we be more efficient, what are our biggest threats? But I thought to make it more fun and more, they would be more engaged, I thought I'll just make it in some sort of quiz style, adding also their own stats in. But then after the first or second question, I already noticed that there's so much more about winning this quiz than actually wanting to understand the answers, that it was like, oh, I got it wrong. I don't even want to know what the answer is anymore. But yeah, sometimes if you do it like in small proportions, you can sort of trigger this competitiveness and use it in your advantage to explain things to them.
Yeah, I think that's what I loved about your speed example, because that's the same thing there. Is you're showing them you're playing at this speed, but you could be playing at this speed, and you're challenging them the whole time to go up to that speed. And I think that's a lot of those things have to be. It can get a bit too much, because we use this 12-point system, which is basically an expected possession value model. And there is a little problem there that they can actually see their rankings and start competing with each other on those particular rankings. So there is a potential problem there. We had a striker, Nico Jurdic. The only thing he would ask me is like, how many points did I get? How many points did I get? And there would be a big focus on that. So you have to be careful about how you use this. But it was a thing I wasn't prepared for, is this just incredible competitiveness in everything. I mean, one example was like their heart rate monitors. I saw two of them competing over who had the highest heart rate in a training. I mean,
that's great. So I have one more question, and anything extra you would like to add will be great. But first, it would be nice to see how the visual sketch is shaping up, because we have talked about a lot of things. There we have it. Well, it's hard to read all now, but looks interesting. I mean, I always love these things because it's so easy to go through the conversation, and I'm so bad at taking notes that this is basically my notes. So thanks, Virginia, for that. That's great. So, guys,
I'll just, if you may, Ravi, to comment on the latest point, because there's often a discussion, because we address also, coaches, analysts that are going to say, yes, but me, my player, let's say, will not listen to these kind of stuff. And I have been through many players that will not, I would say, like to sit in a room with David or wouldn't care. But from experience, well, we distinguish at least two groups. I would say the instinctive learners and the cognitive learners. And just to say to every coach that you can pass data-related evidence and information to even instinctive learners that don't want to see the data by itself by training. So it's just a matter of it forces as coaches to be creative, but there's always ways to pass the data information. It's not, if you cannot pass him by a chart or by a visual, there's always a way to pass it. So it's not true that you cannot, I would say, bring your data point. And I've seen some very data resistant player or just advice resistant players but then you can do it simply by not saying it, but reproducing the situation on the pitch. But there's always a way to communicate the information.
Very good point, Adrien. I totally agree.
It's a great point, because actually there are many places where that kind of communication can happen. You can have the big group gather together, which is a very specific social situation with, as Vosse mentioned, very high competitive people. Then you have ways of translating information through videos. Then you have individual interactions between players and analysts of many kinds, and also coaches, and also interactions between players themselves. So that's a very important point, I think, because we should also think about that. If you're a data analyst, especially in terms of not getting frustrated if certain kind of plot or certain kind of process doesn't work, because we are dealing with different types of people and different kinds of environments here. So I think the adaptability, it's a very important skill for anyone working in this from the data side, but in any possible things, because we need to adapt to organizations, people, processes, moments, mental pressure, anything that you might have in that. And definitely we should be open to explore any path possible if the information can go there. We tend to talk about analytics and technology and software and so on in very positive terms, right? Like we have to adapt this because it's so important. But I'm wondering if we can talk about both things. If both what are we doing right now as a community, let's say it, in data analytics in football, but also what do you think we are doing wrong, or we're not really grasping yet to actually be functional within clubs and within football teams? And if you can add to that, this is a question for the three of you. If you can add a little bit about how's the future of football going to look like in terms of when is data scientists be part of a coaching staff? Should it be a part of that, or is just a whole shift in the organization itself?
Yeah, I think the one thing most of us are doing wrong, and if we're not doing it wrong and we're aware of it, we still struggle to do it well, is that we need to make the club BI ready, analytics ready. And I think this is a process not to be neglected, because, as I said before, coming up with a clever report that's completely right doesn't mean it's very useful in the decision making. So analysts also should spend time, or their managers or whoever's responsible for that department, in how will this be integrated and how will it be sustainable, because you don't want one analyst or one trainer to leave and immediately you have to spend another year on another game model, or the code that someone left is not, you cannot use it with the people that fill his position because it's too specific or the comments aren't clear enough on it. So I think to just think of a structure, good architecture, good variables, good toolboxes, all those kind of things, and implement this within the strategy of your club. I think that's something we can do a lot better, and it's basically the next step up from just studying interesting stuff at universities or at a small department into a wider spread usable knowledge within the club.
That's great. Anyone wants to add something more?
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead, David.
I mean, from a personal perspective, I can see lots of things that isn't optimal about the way that I want to be. I mean, I sort of came from the outside, and I think it's exactly down the lines of what Vosse says, that what I'm doing is very interesting and insightful, I think, but it needs to be professionalized and done seriously within clubs. And I don't think that that's happening as it is just now. I mentioned this before, and I think I'd always come back to this frustration I have about these these people that played football once and then end up in a kind of decision-making, data-driven position, but don't know about how data science is changing and how it can be applied and those types of things. So I think that we need to get away from that type of person and let the data scientist in, either in a coaching capacity or as not as a coach, but as a helping the coaching staff or helping the scouting staff or helping with communication with the fans. I think that we need to find a way of letting them have a little bit more impact within the clubs. So yeah, it feels a bit bad that I'm not being so self-critical here, but the four of us who are sitting here are doing quite good jobs, I think, and I think there's a lot of clubs that can learn from this, from my experience talking to other clubs.
The first point I would mention will probably like to calibrate your work according to the impact or the expected impact, because sometimes we are crossing so many fields that we're going to touch a bit to try to make everything evolve step by step. But I really think that our stakeholders, especially the board, if he wants to invest more and more on analytics, needs some proof of work and some proof of efficiency. And that's why I often start by scouting and mentioning scouting again and again, because I hardly know, I would say, an area where analytics can basically drive a so high ROE for so little time investment, because it's technically very easy to set up. So this would be the first point. And for me, the second one, and to answer to the question, will coaching staffs be with data science? Well, for me, it will remain crucial for the clubs, I would say, to manage their data science, because it's their continuity. Although personally, we now have in Monaco a head coach, Robert Moreno, that is very keen on data. So I think one day he could come to this perspective to integrate a data scientist to his staff. But what we often forget as a data scientist is that, okay, we deliver the data to some way or another, and then the job is done. But there's a real hole in some business intelligence aspects, to go to this phrase, and to processes, like on the coaching staff also. I'm studying at the moment, actually, all the processes to basically treat the maximum of the objective information, because I'm afraid that in the current path we're leading, we're going to overload sometimes staffs with objective information, with insights. But what happens if they're not going to have the processes to treat them? So what are the processes where you can use the data into your starting 11 to anticipate your changes for the game? This is not something that normally us data scientists or analysts, or like me, I would say coaching data assistant, I don't know what I would be, but this is something that we can not give all the answer, but we can try to help our coaching staff to think about the best process to help us give them even more objective information. And to decide also to have a kind of roadmap. Of course, it's not easy, but when do I let emotional information and subjective information enter, and when do I base myself on the objective information? And a last thing that we all mention is that I would say the physical part of the data has evolved much more than the technical and tactical. And if you still think maybe in 5 years we'll regard us as stupid today, that the dimensions of the drills we're having in trainings are data driven because of the training loads, but at the end, the content, the technical and tactical content, is often not related to data. So basically, we're just saying we're going to use data to do the dimensions of the training, but no, in the inside, no data information. And I think in 5 years, we'll laugh at us when we see this.
That's incredible, guys. Really, I would like to thank the three of you. The conversation was amazing. I really will go through this video a couple of times, because I think there's a lot of things being said in short time that are really valuable, that really set a path for the future. And it will be interesting to see this video within 5 years to see how far were we from reality. For sure, this video 5 years ago will look like future, because analytics in football has changed so much. I'm willing to see how it's going to develop in time, but hopefully we will have more open data, more people working in companies, in clubs, in universities, doing these kind of things, and better cohesion between every part of the organization, which in the end is a critical thing, right? Well, thank you all again. This is the end of the talk, and thank everyone watching. And the next session, I'm not sure what it is, but it's not on analytics, but we're coming back soon, I think within a month. And thanks again, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.